Princess Lyra of the Zenthari Empire had always loved stories as a child. She would sit in the grand library of the royal spire, her silver fingers tracing the edges of ancient data crystals, while the old caretakers whispered tales of distant wars. And forgotten species among these stories, none fascinated her more than the ones about humans. The humans, they said, were not like other beings. They did not build elegant cities or compose symphonies that bent light into music they did not wear, flowing robes or speak in measured tones. No, humans were different. They were wild, fierce, and unpredictable. They fought with everything they had, even when defeat was certain. They preferred death to surrender. Of course, the elders always added with a soft chuckle. Those are just stories Lyra meant to scare young heirs into discipline. No such species could truly exist in their galaxy. The Zenthari ruled the core worlds with grace and order. Their technology was flawless, their society peaceful, and advanced humans, if they ever existed, were long gone, wiped out by their own chaos. But Lyra never fully believed that, now at 23 cycles old, Lyra was no longer a child. She was a princess of the high court trained in diplomacy, quantum, linguistics, and stellar navigation. Yet the human stories still echoed in her mind, especially now. The Krell had come. No one knew where they came from, only that they consumed everything in their path. Entire colonies vanished, overnight. Planets were stripped bare of life and left as cold husks. The Zenthari sent their finest warships to stop the swarm, but ship after ship fell silent. The council grew nervous for the first time in centuries. Fear crept into their polished halls. Then came the signal, a faint broken transmission from Sector 9 Gamma, deep in the outer rim. The source was weak, but the language was unmistakable. Old Terran English, a human tongue. The council dismissed it as a Krell trick, a lure to draw their forces into a trap. But Lyra could not ignore it. If even a single human still lived, it meant the stories were true. And if the stories were true, then maybe humans held something the Zenthari had lost, the will to fight without hope. Against all advice, she took a small scout vessel, the Orion, and slipped past the main fleet. Her crew of 6 was loyal but uneasy. They did not share her belief in myths. As the Orion dropped out of slipstream near the dead moon of Virex, the sensors lit up with destruction. The surface was blackened, craters pockmarked the ground from orbital bombardment. Debris floated in low orbit like ghosts of lost ships. And then they saw Hera, single figure in battered armor, standing in the center of the ruins. Lyra ordered a silent approach. They watched from above as the human moved with calm purpose. She dragged broken Krell drones into a pile, poured fuel over them, and set them ablaze with a flick of her wrist. She planted charges on the wreckage of a downed harvester, then walked away without flinching as the explosion lit up the gray sky. This was no desperate survivor, this was a warrior. Lyra made her choice. Land the ship, she said. But Princess, the crew whispered, what if it is a trap? Then I will face it myself. The ramp lowered with a soft hiss. The human spun instantly. Rifle raised, her stance firm, her eyes hidden behind a cracked visor. But her aim was steadily. Lyra stepped forward slowly, hands open. No weapons. She wore her royal robes shimmering with soft blue light, but her voice was gentle. We come in peace, she said. The human did not lower her weapon right away. She studied Lyra for a long moment, then spoke, her voice rough like stone on metal. Peace is dead out here, Princess. You should not have come. Lyra felt. Her heart raced, not from fear, but from awe. This human was wounded, blood dried on her temple. Her armor scorched, her boots torn, yet she stood like a pillar in a storm. Where are your people? Lyra asked. Gone, the human said simply. We held the line so the colony ships could escape. 3,000 souls made it off-world because we stayed. You stayed alone. I was the last one standing. The words hit Lyra like a wave. She had read of sacrifice in history texts, but never seen it, never felt it until now. Why? She asked softly. Because someone had to. That simple answer carried more weight than any treaty or decree Lyra had ever signed. The human glanced at the sky, her body tense. The Krell will return, she said. They always do. We can take you with us. Lyra offered, quickly. The human shook her head. No, I have a job to finish. What job? There is a command bunker under the northern ridge, still active, still sending out a homing pulse. If the Krell track it, they will find the colony ships. You cannot destroy it alone. Have been alone for days. Princess Lyra looked at her crew, then back at the human, and made a decision that would change everything. We will help you, the human frowned. You are not soldiers, no, Lyra said. But we have weapons and shields, and I will not stand by while a warrior like you fights alone. For the first time, the human's eyes softened just a little behind the visor. Then let us finish this. They moved together through the ruins, the Zenthari crew. Nervous at first, but inspired by their princess. And by the human who moved like shadow and flame, she showed them how to use broken walls for cover, how to set traps with leftover Krell tech, how to stay silent even when fear clawed at their throats. Her name was Claire, she told Lyra as they crouched. Behind a collapsed tower, Claire, Lyra repeated it. Felt strong, simple, real. You do not talk much, do you? Claire asked, not when words waste time. Good answer. As night fell, the sky turned red with incoming ships. They are here, Claire said, tightening her grip. On her rifle, the Krell descended not in scouts but in force, hundreds of drones swarming from drop pods, walkers stomping through the dust. Their red eyes scanning for life. Claire did not wait. She chargedly watched in stunned silence as Claire leapt from a ridge, landed on the back of a Krell walker, and drove a plasma knife into its core. The machine shrieked and collapsed. She rolled to her feet, fired 3 shots into a drone cluster, then sprinted toward the next threat. The Zenthari opened fire from cover, their beams precise, their movements graceful. But Claire was different. She was raw, relentless. She used her rifle as a club when it ran dry. She threw grenades with perfect timing. She never stopped moving, never stopped fighting. One point, a drone lunged at Lyra from behind, but before she could react, Claire was there, slamming the creature into the ground and crushing its skull with her boot. Stay behind me. Princess Claire growled, then vanished back into the fray for hours. The battle raged. The Krell kept coming, but Claire held the line like a wall of fire. Finally, they reached the bunker entrance hidden beneath. Rubble. Claire planted the last charges, her hands shaking from exhaustion, but her movements surrogate back. She ordered. The Zenthari scrambled to safety. Lyra hesitated. Go, she said. Lyra ran. The explosion shook the moon, a fireball rising into the dark sky. The pulse signal died instantly. Silence fell. Then Claire collapsed. Lyra rushed to her side. The human's armor was cracked, her side soaked and bloody. You did it, Lyra whispered, holding her head gently. We did it, Claire corrected weakly, on the Orion. The medics worked fast, but Claire's wounds were deep. She had lost too much blood, fought too long. As she lay on the med bed, pale but awake, she looked at Lyra and said, Do not tell them I am weak. You are not weak. Lyra said, You are the strongest being I have ever met. Claire gave a small, tired smile. It was not warm, but it was real. Listen, princess, she said, the Krell fear one thing more than death. What is that? Humans who do not run. Lyra nodded. I will remember. When Claire was stable enough to speak, she refused all offers of medals or titles. I do not fight for glory, she said. I fight so others live before. She left the ship. She stood with Lyra on the observation deck. You changed everything, Lyra said. No, Claire replied. You chose to believe that is what changed things. Lyra gave her a gift. Then a Zenthari blade forged from star metal. It glowed faintly within her light and bore the royal crest. You fight like our legends, she said. But you are real. Claire took the blade and nodded. Thank you, princess. As her new ship lifted off, Lyra watched until it disappeared into the stars. That night she returned to the capital, not as a curious princess, but as a leader with fire in her eyes. She stood before the High Council, her voice clear and strong. The humans are not myths. She declared they are real, and they are fighting a war we thought we could ignore. But if they fall, the Krell will come for us next. We must stand with them. Some elders protested, calling it reckless to trust a species known only through fables, but others had seen the sensor logs, one human against an army. And she won within days. The Zenthari fleet began to mobilize, not for conquest but for aid. And on the front lines, Claire fought on now with allies at her back. The war was far from over. But for the first time in years, there was hope. And it began with a princess who dared to believe in a legend and a warrior who proved it true. As the Orion returned to the capital, Lyra looked out at the stars and smiled. The galaxy was bigger than she had ever imagined, and somewhere out there humans were still fighting. She would make sure they were never alone again. Weeks passed since Princess Lyra returned from Virex and the Xanthari Empire was no longer the same. The Council had voted narrowly to send aid to human outposts along the Outer Rim. A move that shocked many but inspired more everyday ships once used for trade or patrol were refitted with weapons and shields and crews trained not just to defend, but to fight beside humans. Meanwhile, Claire had not stopped moving. She arrived at Fort Helios, a crumbling station orbiting a dying star. It was the last known human stronghold in Sector 12, and it was under siege. The Krell had surrounded it for days, their swarm ships blotting out the sun. Claire's arrival in her small Xanthari scout ship drew confused hails, but when she transmitted her identity, the gates opened fast inside. The station was chaos. Wounded soldiers limped through corridors. Children huddled in bunk rooms, medics worked without sleep, and yet no one had given up. A grizzled officer named Dana met her at the dock, her face lined with exhaustion. But her eyes sharp. "You are the one from Virex," Dana said. "Word travels fast," Claire replied. "They say you held a moon alone." "I had help in the end." Dana nodded, then looked past her at the sleek Xanthari ship. "You brought friends." "Not yet," Claire said, "but they are coming." She spent the next hours organizing defenses, teaching soldiers how to spot Krell infiltration patterns, how to use debris fields as traps, how to fight when ammo ran low. She did not command. She led by example, and the people followed. On the third night, the Krell attacked not with drones but with a bio-titan, a living war machine the size of a city block. It tore through the outer shields like paper. Claire stood on the command deck watching it approach. "We cannot stop that," Dana said quietly. "Maybe not," she said, "but we can hurt it." She suited up again, her Xanthari blade strapped to her hip. Her rifle reloaded, she took a team of 12 volunteers, the youngest among them just 16. "We are not going to win," she told them plainly. "But we are going to make them bleed so bad they remember our names." They launched in old fighters patched with scrap metal and flew straight into the storm. Claire's plan was simple, reckless and brilliant. She led the Titan away from the station, luring it into a field of dead satellites, then triggered a chain reaction that sent shrapnel tearing through its hide. The creature roared in pain, but kept coming. Her fighter took heavy damage. She ejected just before it exploded and landed on the Titan's back using mag boots to cling to its pulsing flesh. For an hour she climbed, cutting through tendons, severing nerve clusters, planting charges with steady hands, while Krell drones swarmed around her back on Fort Helios. Dana watched the feed, her hands clenched. "She is going to die," someone whispered. "No," Dana said, "she is going to win." When Claire reached the Titan's core, she did not hesitate. She drove the Xanthari blade deep into its heart and activated the last charge. The explosion lit up the entire sector. Fort Helios shook but held, and Claire was gone. Silence fell over the station, then a weak signal crackled through the comspic. "Me up," she said. "I am not dead yet." They found her floating in debris, half her suit gone. Her body burned but alive. As they pulled her inside, the station erupted in cheers. Not loud or wild, but deep and quiet. The kind of sound that comes from people who have seen hope in the darkest place. Meanwhile, on Xanthara, the capital world, Lyra received the report. She read it 3 times, then stood and walked to the war room. The first Xanthari battle group was ready. She boarded the flagship Aurora. "Not as a diplomat, but as a commander, we go to Fort Helios," she ordered. The fleet jumped to slipstream. When they arrived, the station was still standing, but barely. Krell ships circled like vultures waiting to strike. Lyra did not wait for talks or scans. She gave the order. Open fire. Xanthari beams cut through the dark, striking with precision and power. The Krell swarm scattered, confused by the sudden assault. On the station, Claire watched from a medbed as the Aurora led the charge. She smiled. They came. Lyra hailed the station, and when Claire's face appeared on screen, she felt a rush of relief. "You look terrible," Lyra said. "You should see the other guy." Claire replied. Within hours, the Krell were driven back. The Xanthari established a perimeter and began repairs on the station. Lyra came aboard herself, ignoring protocol. She walked through the corridors until she found Claire sitting on a crate outside the med bay, eating ration paste. "You should be resting." "I rest when the war ends." Lyra sat beside her, the two women silent for a moment, watching the stars through a cracked viewport. "Why do you keep fighting?" Claire asked. "Because you showed me what courage really is," Lyra said. Claire shook her head. No, I just do what needs doing. That is what makes it real. They talked for hours, not as princess and warrior, but as equals. Lyra told her of the changes on Xanthara, how schools now taught human history, how children drew pictures of brave Earth soldiers. Claire told her of lost colonies of friends buried in unmarked graves, of the quiet moments between battles when she wondered if it was all worth it. It is worth it, Lyra said, because you are still here. The next morning the Krell returned stronger, this time with a command hive, a massive vessel that controlled the swarm. The Xanthari admiral wanted to fall back. Regroup. Lyra looked at Claire. What do you think? Claire studied the scans, then pointed to a weak point in the hive's shield matrix. They rotate every 90 seconds. She said if we hit it, then we can breach the core. It is a narrow window. Where is narrow windows? Lyra gave the order. The Aurora led the charge, Claire piloting a borrowed fighter. Despite her injuries, she flew like she was born in the void, weaving through fire straight to the weak point. At the exact second she fired, the hive shield flickered. The Xanthari fleet unleashed everything. The hive exploded in a silent bloom of green fire. The swarm collapsed without command, drifting aimlessly. Victory. But Claire's fighter was caught in the blast. Again they found her adrift again. She was alive. This time Lyra was there when they pulled her in. You are impossible, she said, helping her sit. You keep saying that, Claire grinned weakly. Back on the Aurora, the medics insisted Claire stay still, but she refused, until she saw the colony ships arriving safe from the Outer Rim family stepping onto Fort Helios crying, hugging soldiers who had held the line. That was enough for her. She slept for 2 days straight. When she woke, Lyra was there. The council wants to name you an honored ally of the Empire. Claire groaned. Not another title. It is not just a title, Lyra said. It means you can call on our fleet anytime, anywhere. Claire thought about it, then nodded. All right, but only if you promise something, anything. Promise you will never stop believing in us. Lyra took her hand. I promise. In the weeks that followed, the alliance grew. Human engineers worked with Xanthari scientists to build better weapons. Human pilots trained with Xanthari navigators, and Xanthari medics learned human field medicine. Claire became a bridge between worlds, not by speaking but by doing. She trained squads on both sides, taught them to trust each other, to fight as one. And Lyra stood beside her, not above her. One evening, as they stood on the Aurora's observation deck watching a fleet of mixed ships patrol the border, Claire spoke softly. You know, I never thought I would see this. Aliens who fight for us, not against us. We are not aliens to each other anymore, Lyra said. We are allies. Claire nodded. Maybe even friends. Especially friends. The war was not over. The Krell still lurked in the dark corners of the galaxy, but they were no longer unstoppable. Because now they faced something they could not understand. Unity, courage, and a human warrior who refused to fall, and a Xanthari princess who refused to look away. Together they had turned a legend into a future, and that future was just beginning. The war had changed but not ended. The Krell were wounded, not dead. They retreated into the void, licking their wounds and gathering strength in the dark places between stars. But for the first time, humans and Xanthari stood side by side, not as strangers, but as allies. Claire had become a symbol. Though she hated the word, she did not want statues or songs. She only wanted to keep people alive. Yet her name spread across both species. Young Xanthari children wore makeshift armor and called themselves. Claire's shadow human recruits studied her battle logs like sacred text. Princess Lyra watched this with quiet pride. She had returned to Xanthara not to rest but to build. She pushed the council to open academies where human and Xanthari cadets trained together. She ordered the translation of human poetry into Xanthari light script and hosted feasts where both species shared food and stories. But peace was fragile. One morning, a distress call came from the far edge of known space, not from a human colony or a Xanthari outpost, but from a neutral world called Ilaris, a planet of scholars and healers who had refused to take sides in any war. The Krell had attacked not to conquer, but to destroy. Lyra knew Ilaris held something valuable. The last archive of pre-war human history, including records from old Earth. Some said it held the original Declaration of Human Rights, the first star chart, the voice of the first woman who walked on the moon. If it fell, it would be a loss for all, she Went to Claire, who was recovering from her last injuries in a quiet garden on Zenthara. We have to go. Claire said before Lyra could even speak. You are still healing, and they are still burning libraries. Within hours they were aboard the Aurora heading. For Ilaris, when they arrived, the planet was cloaked in smoke, cities burned. The Krell had already landed and were tearing through the great archive, a dome of crystal and steel that housed millions of data crystals. Claire suited up again, her body stiff but her will unbroken. This time Lyra went with her, not as a princess but as a soldier. She wore light combat armor and carried a pulse rifle. She had trained in secret for weeks. You do not have to do this. Lyra said, Yes, I do. Claire replied, If we lose this, we lose who we were. They dropped in under cover of night, the Aurora drawing Krell fire while they slipped through the ruins. Inside the archive, it was chaos, shelves overturned, data, crystals shattered, but some remained hidden in vaults. Deep below, they fought room by room. Claire moving like a ghost, taking down Krell patrols with silent efficiency. Lyra covered her back, her shots precise, her breath steady in the central chamber. They found the core vault sealed by an old human lock. Claire entered the code, her fingers trembling slightly. It had been years since she saw this place as a child on a school trip. The door opened. Inside sat rows of untouched crystals and one old hollow projector. Claire activated it. A woman appeared, dressed in simple clothes, her hair gray, her eyes kind. She spoke in calm, clear English. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all beings are created equal. It was the voice of Earthly. Stood frozen tears in her violet eyes. That is what they are trying to erase. Claire whispered. They are not going to succeed. They loaded the most vital crystals into secure cases. But as they turned to leave, the Krell broke through the main gate, hundreds of them. Claire looked at Lyra. Then at the vault. Go, she said. I will hold them. No, Lyra said, we go together. There is no together this time, princess. You have to get this out. I am not leaving you. Claire grabbed her shoulders. Look at me. If this archive dies, the next generation will not know why we fight. They will only know war, not hope. Lyra swallowed hard. Then promise me you will come back. I always come back, Lyra. Claire turned to face the swarm. He had one rifle, 2 grenades, and the Zenthari blade. It was enough. She fought like fire in the dark, using the archive's narrow halls to her advantage. She triggered old security systems, flooding corridors with sonic pulses. She set traps with fallen shelves and broken glass. She made every step cost the Krell dearly. Above, the Aurora fought desperately to keep the skies clearly. Reached the ship, clutching the data case like a child. Get us out of here, she ordered, but we cannot leave her. We have toast. The Aurora lifted off. Lyra watched the archive through the viewport, then a bright light flared from the dome. Claire had overloaded the core. The explosion consumed the building and the Krell with it silently. Closed her eyes back on Zenthara. The council mourned, but Lyra did not. She knew better. 3 days later, a small escape pod drifted into Zenthari space. Inside was Claire, battered, burned, but alive. She had used the archive's emergency tunnel to reach a hidden shuttle and rode the blast wave into orbit. When Lyra saw her, she did not speak. She just hugged her tightly. You liar, Claire whispered with a weak smile. You said you always come back. I did. The archive was gone, but its heart lived on in the data case. Lyra made sure it was copied and shared across every world. Human and Zenthari schools began teaching the old words, the old dreams. And Claire recovered. Again, but something had shifted. She no longer saw herself as just a soldier. She began to speak at gatherings, not about tactics, but about memory, about why humans fought not for power, but for the right to remember who they were. Lyra stood beside her. Always one evening as they walked through the royal gardens, now filled with human flowers and Zenthari trees. Claire stopped. What happens when the war ends? Lyra asked. We build. She said. We teach, we remember, and if they come again, then we stand again together. Together, in the months that followed, the alliance grew stronger. Joint fleets patrolled the borders, new colonies rose on once dead worlds, and children of both species played in the same schools. Claire trained a new generation not just to fight, but to protect, to value life, not just victory. And Lyra ruled not as a distant princess, but as a leader who had seen the cost of war and the power of hope. One day, a young Zenthari girl asked Claire why she never wore medals. Because the real honor is seeing you safe, she replied. The girl smiled and ran off to join her human friend in the courtyard. Claire watched her go. "We did good," Lyra said, coming to stand beside her. "We are not done yet. But we are winning, yes," Claire said. "We are winning." And for the first time in a long time she believed it. The stars still held danger. The Krell still waited in the dark, but they were no longer alone. They had each other. And that was enough. The peace did not last long. Just as the new colonies began to bloom and children learned each other's songs in shared classrooms, a new signal came not from the Krell, but from deeper space beyond the known limit. Was a human signal, old and broken, but unmistakable. Princess Lyra received it in the war room of the Aurora. Now her permanent command ship, Claire, stood beside her, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. "That frequency. It is from the first wave," she said. "The Lost Fleet." The Lost Fleet was a legend, even among humans, a group of colony ships that vanished over a century ago during the early expansion. They carried 500,000 souls and were never seen again. Most believed they were destroyed by cosmic storms or pirate raids. But this signal said otherwise. "They are alive," Claire whispered, "and they are calling for help." Lyra did not hesitate. She ordered the fleet to prepare for a long jump beyond mapped space. It was risky. The region was unstable, full of gravitational anomalies and dead zones, but if humans were out there, they would not be left behind. Claire insisted on leading the mission. "You are still recovering from Alaris," Lyra said gently. "And they are still out there," she replied, so they went. The journey took weeks. The Aurora and 2 support vessels slipping through warped space where stars blinked in and out of existence. When they finally arrived, they found not a colony, but a Persona, massive ring-shaped structure built around a black hole, its surface dark and scarred. With battle marks, the signal came from deep inside and showed life signs, thousands of them, all human. The Krell had found the Lost Fleet first. They had not killed them. They had caged them using their biotech to drain their will, turning them into hollow shells for labor or worse. Claire's hands clenched into fist. "We get them out," Lyra said. "How the ring is guarded by a Krell dreadnought, and the gravity well will tear any ship apart if we get too close. Then we go in quiet." They took a small team in stealth shuttle, slipping past the dreadnought under the cover of a solar flare. Inside the ring, it was worse than they imagined. Humans in tattered clothes moved like ghosts, their eyes empty, their spirits broken. Claire moved through the corridors like a shadow, taking out Krell guards with silent precision. Lyra hacked into the control systems, disabling security fields and opening cell doors. One by one, the prisoners woke from their daze. A young woman with short black hair looked at Claire and whispered, "Is it really you?" "You," Claire nodded. "It is me, Lisa. You are supposed to be dead, so are you." They hugged quickly, then got to work. The freed humans were weak but not broken. They knew the ring better than anyone. They led Claire and Lyra to the core, where the Krell hive mind controlled the whole station. But there was a problem. The core was fused with a human mind. An old man sat in the center, wired into the machine, his body frail but his eyes sharp. He was Dr. Ellis, the last captain of the Lost Fleet. He had sacrificed himself to keep the others alive by linking his mind to the Krell system. He slowed their control just enough to give the people hope. "You cannot destroy the core without killing me," he said when they found him. "We are not leaving you behind," Claire said. "There is no other way." Lyra studied the system, then had an idea. "What if we do not destroy it?" she said. "What if we take it?" The Krell used bio-neural links to control the ring, but Xanthari tech could isolate and transfer consciousness. It was dangerous, untested, but possible. They had no choice. While Claire held off a Krell counterattack at the main gate, Lyra and the freed scientists worked fast, rewiring the system, preparing a neural pod. The dreadnought outside began to move, sensing the breach. "We are out of time," Lyra said. "Do it," Ellis whispered. They activated the transfer. Light filled the chamber, then silence. The ring systems went dark. The Krell collapsed. Outside, the dreadnought spun wildly, its command link severed. Claire led the survivors to the shuttles as the ring began to break apart under the black hole's pull. They barely made it back to the Aurora as they jumped to safety. The ring vanished into the event horizon. On board the Aurora, Dr. Ellis opened his eyes in the medbay. "Weak, but free. You saved us," he said to Leirano. Claire said, "We all saved each other." The return journey was quiet, but full of life. The rescued humans slowly came back to themselves, sharing stories of survival, of secret. Schools held in cell blocks of songs sung in the dark to keep hope alively, listened to everyone. When they reached Xanthera, the Empire welcomed them not as refugees but as family. New homes were built, new schools opened, and Dr. Ellis began, working with Xanthari scientists to develop defenses against Krell mind control. Claire watched it all from the sidelines as always, but one evening Lyra found her on the Aurora's observation deck staring at the stars. "You are thinking about the ones we could not save," Claire said without turning. "Always do not carry that weight alone. I am not, I have you." "Yes, you do." They stood in silence for a long time. Then Claire spoke again. "The Krell will come back stronger now that they lost the ring." "I know so. What do we do? Get ready, together." Always in the weeks that followed, training intensified. Joint drills between human and Xanthari forces became daily events. Claire taught hand-to-hand combat while Lyra oversaw fleet coordination. But something new began to grow, not just alliance but trust. Human engineers helped Xanthari design lighter armor. Xanthari healers taught humans how to mend nerve damage with light therapy. And children from both species played games that mixed old Earth rules with Xanthari logic puzzles. One day a group of kids built a model of the Aurora out of scrap and presented it to Claire. She kept it on her desk. Meanwhile, deep in space, the Krell stirred. They had learned something from their losses they could not break. Humans with force alone. So they changed tactics. They began to spread lies, false signals claiming human colonies had turned on Xanthari outposts. Fake videos showing Xanthari ships attacking human ships. Some believed them. Tension rose on the border. World's Lyra called an emergency council. "We cannot let fear undo what we built," she said. "But the proof looks real." A Xanthari elder argued. "Then we find the truth," Claire said. She took a small team back into the outer rim following the source of the fake signals. What they found was a Krell mimic station disguised as a human relay. It was broadcasting lies using stolen data and cloned voices. Claire destroyed it, but not before downloading the truth. When she returned, she played the real footage for everyone. The lies collapsed and trust returned stronger, because they had faced doubt and chosen truth. One evening, as the twin moons of Xanthera rose over the capital, Claire and Lyra walked through the memorial garden, a place built for all who had fallen in the war, human and Xanthari names carved side by side, you know. Claire said, "I never thought I would see a day like this. A day with peace. A day with hope." Lyra took her hand. "This is just the beginning." And somewhere out there, the Krell waited. But they were ready, not just with weapons, but with unity, with memory, with each other. And that was a force even the Krell could not understand. The final battle did not begin with a roar, but with silence. For months, the Krell had vanished. No attacks, no signals, no movement at all. The outer colonies grew quiet. Too quiet. Claire felt it in her bones. Something was coming. Princess Lyra saw it. Too, the scouts reported strange energy readings near the galactic core. A place the Krell had never touched before. "They are building something," Claire said, standing over the star map in the Aurora's war room. But what something big enough to end? Everything. They prepared in secret. The Human-Xanthari alliance had grown stronger. New ships launched every week, soldiers trained harder, and scientists worked day and night on better shields and weapons. But Claire knew weapons alone would not win. This she gathered a small team, not soldiers but thinkers. A Xanthari linguist, a human historian, a former Krell prisoner who had escaped the mind hive. They studied old data looking for weakness, not in the Krell bodies, but in their design. The Krell were not born. They were made, created long ago by a dead race to be perfect warriors, but perfection has cracks. They found it in an ancient log from a human deep space probe. The Krell hive mind had a single command node. Not a ship, not a planet, but a living core hidden in a quantum fold near the core world of Xanthar. Destroy the core, and the swarm would fall, but reaching it was near impossible. The fold was guarded by a storm of black holes and time distortions. Only a ship with both human instinct and Xanthari precision could navigate it. Claire would pilot it, Lyra would command, and they would go alone. The council protested, but Lyra silenced them. "This is not a war of fleets," she said. "It is a war of wills, and we have the strongest will." Ship they chose was small, fast, and built from both worlds, its hull lined with human steel and Xanthari light. Weave its core powered by a shared engine that ran on trust as much as fuel. They named it the Dawn as they launched the whole alliance, watched from every station, every colony, every ship good luck came. The messages from thousands of voices. Claire did not reply. She just nodded and engaged the slip drive. The journey through the storm was brutal. Time bent around them, hours felt like seconds, then like years. They saw visions of past battles. Lost friends, futures that never were. Lyra held the course. Her hands steady on the controls. Claire flew by. Feel her eyes locked on the shifting path ahead. We are almost there. Lyra said, I know. They broke through into the fold, and there it was. The Korea pulsing sphere of dark flesh floating in the center of a ring of dead stars. It hummed with a sound that made their bones ache. Ships appeared instantly. Not hundreds, but thousands. Claire did not slow down. She flew straight at them. The Dawn twisted and rolled, firing as it went. Lyra managed the shield's rerouting power with every hit. They lost the rear cannons, then the left wing. But they kept going. When they were close enough, Claire armed the final weapon, a bomb made from the last piece of old Earth soil and Xanthari star metal. It was not just a bomb. It was a promise. I have to get closer, she said. It is too dangerous. It has to be done. Lyra looked at her, then nodded. Do it, Claire. Ejected in a pod just before the Dawn hit the core. The explosion was silent, but vast light tore through the fold. Time itself seemed to shudder. The Krell ships froze, then fell dark one by one, drifting like dead leaves on the pod. Claire watched it happen. It was over. Lyra found her an hour later, floating near the edge of the fold. You did it, she said, helping her inside the rescue shuttle. We did it back home. The celebration lasted for days, but Claire did not join it. She stood instead at the memorial garden, placing a small stone for every human in Xanthari who had fallen. Lyra found her there. What now, she asked. Now we heal, and if they come back they will not, she said. The core is gone. The hive is broken. They are just drones now, lost and confused. Then we help them too. Claire looked at her, surprised. They were made to fight, but they do not have to stay that way. You really believe that? I believe in second chances. Claire smiled faintly. You have changed me, princess. No, you changed yourself. You just needed someone to see you. In the months that followed, the Alliance turned from war to peace. They found scattered Krell drones wandering space without purpose. Some attacked out of habit, but many just floated. Claire led missions not to destroy but to study. To understand with Dr. Ellis and Xanthari bioengineers, they developed a signal that calmed the drones, a frequency based on old human lullabies and Xanthari harmony tones. One by one, the drones powered down, not dead, but at rest. They were placed in sanctuaries orbiting quiet stars where they would never hurt anyone again. Meanwhile, new cities rose on once scarred worlds. Schools taught both histories. Children learned to speak both languages and the story of the human warrior and the Xanthari. Princess became a tale told not as legend but as truth. One evening, Claire stood on the balcony of a small home on a green world. She had never thought she would live to see peace. Lyra joined her, holding 2 cups of warm tea. You are quiet, she said, just thinking about how far we have come from a dead moon to this. Yes, do you ever miss the fight? Sometimes, she said. But I do not miss the loss, me neither. They watched the sunset together. 2 women from different worlds who had saved each other more than once. The next morning, Claire visited a training yard where young recruits practiced not just combat but rescue tactics, diplomacy, and first aid. A little girl with silver skin and dark hair ran up to her. Are you really Claire? She asked, eyes wide. And did you really fight a Titan? It did. Can I be like you? You can be better. The girl beamed and ran off. Lyra watched from a distance, smiling. Later that week, the council offered Claire a seat on the High Alliance Council. She refused. I am not a politician. She told Lyra, then what will you do? Teach, she said. Not just how to fight, but why not too? And so she did. She traveled from world to world, visiting schools, stations, and outposts, sharing stories not of glory, but of choice, of standing up. Not because you are strong, but because it is right. Lyra ruled with wisdom shaped by war but guided by hope. And the galaxy healed. Years passed. The scars remained. But so did the bonds. One day, an old Claire sat under a tree on Xanthara, watching children play a game that mixed human tag with Xanthari light chasing. A young Xanthari boy came up to her. They say you saved us all, he said. No, she replied. We saved each other. He thought about that, then nodded and ran off to join the game. Lyra sat beside her, gray now in, her hair but her eyes still bright. We did good, she said. We did. Do you think they will remember? Not just remember. She said they will live it. And as the sun set over a peaceful world, the wind carried the sound of laughter. Human and Xanthari together, the war was over. But the story was not. It lived on in every act of courage and every choice to help, in every child who believed that even the smallest person could change the stars. And somewhere out there in the quiet dark, a single Krell drone floated, not in rage but in rest, its red eyes dimmed not by force but by peace. The galaxy was not perfect, but it was whole, and that was enough.